Well, people usually check on only around a pound over the holidays. They don't lose it. Hello and welcome to the Dr. Suzette Glasner podcast. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you want to continue to learn from me. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments, or you can email me at askdrglasner@gmail.com. I look forward to hearing from you. So, as promised, today I'm going to be talking about holiday overeating. And I think an interesting nugget of research evidence for us all to keep in mind as we are navigating the holidays, all the different dinners and work lunches and potlucks and restaurant outings that we'll be navigating with tons of tempting foods that maybe we're trying to eat less of or not to eat at all for health reasons, is that the New England Journal of Medicine published a study years ago that showed that while people usually check on only around a pound over the holidays, they don't lose it. It tends to follow us through life over time. So if you think about it, every year around the holidays, you're gaining and keeping about a pound. So think 5 holiday seasons later, 10 holiday seasons later, we are getting progressively heavier with time, unless we're really diligent around keeping with our dietary goals around the holidays, which may sound like a bit of a downer because we all like to splurge during a special time. I want to give you some different ways to think about it to help you feel good about making some decisions in the interest of your health around this time of year. I think we often think, oh, it's the holidays, I can restart come January 1st. But that research in the New England Journal of Medicine suggests that, yeah, you can't. There's always a chance to restart. I will never deny that as someone who specializes in behavior change. But given that about a pound a year tends to stick around, we can't restart 100%. So let's not let that thought get in the way of making some good decisions that are later going to make you feel good and really appreciate the way that you preserved your body in the state that you want it to be. So to avoid getting into that trap, you really kind of need to guard yourself against some of those temptations. Whether you're somebody who considers yourself to be food addicted or not, we can all benefit from using some of the tried and true kind of strategies that help people to navigate cravings to alcohol during the holidays, to other substances, as well as to food. And many years ago, I published an article in the Oprah Magazine about a strategy for dieting that is especially relevant during the holidays, but could be used any time of year, that I call assertive dieting. Because what it really centers around is the idea that you're constantly tempted in social contexts and by very gracious hostesses and hosts to eat in ways that you wouldn't ordinarily. And when I did some survey research of individuals who struggled to navigate holiday eating, one of the things that really stood in the way of that was feeling like guilty and like they're being rude when they turned down offers of foods from hosts or hostesses around the holidays. So I want to teach you a little bit about assertive dieting, and there are really 3 principles that I want you to abide by this holiday season, or at least experiment with as you're navigating some of these situations. So the first principle is you need to get rid of guilt about saying no. That just has to go. You're the one who's going to have to contend with that extra pound or maybe more year after year. You're the one who's going to have to look in the mirror and struggle with that, both in terms of body image, but also more importantly, perhaps in terms of your physical health. If you're somebody who is managing a cardiovascular illness or high cholesterol or anything that necessitates some strict kind of dietary guidelines, or even not so strict, but some dietary guidelines that you're abiding by, you're the one who's going to be stuck with that at the end of the day. So feeling guilty about how you're making another person feel when they're offering you food and you're saying no thanks is something that you have to just get over and move on from. So here's how you talk to yourself about that, because a lot of it has to do with the inner dialogue that you have with yourself. If your friend is offering you something that is just not going to be good for you dietary wise, you want to challenge that idea that your friend really wants you to have it. Like they really want you to have it because they want you to enjoy yourself at their party or their function, but your friend doesn't want you to be overweight or unhealthy, and they're going to get over it and move on to the next party goer and offer them whatever food that was in like an instant if you decide that you don't want to eat what's being offered to you. You also might want to remind yourself if you have risk factors or risky family history that is part of the reason that you're trying to manage your diet as you are. So you're trying to prevent diabetes or cardiovascular disease, and all of that is really more important than indulging your friend and eating their homemade chocolate fudge. So you have to just talk yourself through that with some rational thinking. But then you have the problem of how do you talk to your host or hostess? So what I recommend is to really try to strike the right note, regardless of how somebody's offer of food might feel. Their intentions are usually pure and positive. So I would recommend you comment on how delicious the food looks or how much work it was for them clearly to prepare it. Like something positive about you recognizing the trouble they went to put this in front of you and how good it looks. And then you temper that with, your decision to not consume it or to pass on it. So it'd be like, wow, that looks fabulous. I'm actually really full right now and I'm going to pass on it this time. Or you don't even really need to explain yourself. You could say you're full. You could say, I'm really trying to watch my weight. Or you could say, I'm being really careful about my diet right now. If you feel the need to explain that, you don't really need to or have to. Striking some balance between, wow, that looks amazing, or wow, that must have taken a long time for you to make. I think I'm going to pass on this one though. Thank you so much for offering it. And that's it. So that's principle number 1, ditch the guilt. Principle number 2, and this is really important for people who tend to give in to temptation, like most of us, is to prepare ahead of time. And what I mean by prepare ahead of time, a lot of the time when you're invited out to a festive meal, whether it's around the holidays or some other occasion, all the menus nowadays are online for restaurants. So unless it's like a prefixed menu, you can take a look in advance at what your options are and plan ahead specifically what it is that you're going to order so that you don't end up just sort of like you're hungry, you see something that normally you wouldn't eat, like a really carb heavy pasta or something like that, but it just like sounds good and you end up just impulsively or spontaneously ordering it. Plan ahead what is going to be on your menu so that it aligns with your diet. Another thing that some people may be self-conscious about doing, but it does work, is that we know that restaurants often serve really large portions that are completely unnecessarily large and you don't need to eat that much. It's part of what makes it look appealing on the plate. So what some people do is they will ask for a to-go box as soon as their food arrives, and they will take off the portion of the serving that they don't want to eat in that moment just because it's sitting there. Now, this is your call depending on how formal the occasion is and whether that feels like the right thing to do. But that's a good one to have in your back pocket if you're just going to a casual dinner with your partner or someone in your family and you don't feel so formal as to withhold yourself from doing something like that. The other is at a large holiday gathering, often the food is sitting in front of you for a while, but with a little preparation, you can make sure that you don't overload your plate. So for example, if you're at a buffet, before serving yourself, just look at everything that there is, make a decision. And this has to do with the advanced planning again. Like the principle is the advanced planning. It can be done in many ways in many different contexts, but the idea is that you scan what's there and you decide before you start filling your plate what you're going to put on your plate. And that really helps you avoid impulsive decisions. And that's where temptations get us a lot of the time. Something just looks really good. And so we just impulsively decide like, ooh, I want to have that. And that can sort of like lead you pretty rapidly astray from your sort of eating plan and your eating goals. The other thing you need to tell yourself if you're doing this advanced planning and you are trying to be an assertive dieter is that your first selections are final. So don't allow yourself to then change your mind because something looks really yummy. It looked really yummy before, but when you were in your right mind, you were deciding you were going to avoid it. That's the decision you need to let stick in order to regain that control that you feel like you may be losing when you're in some of these environments. And then finally, principle number 3 is what you do when you slip up. There is this sort of mindset, we even have a term for it in psychology, especially in addiction, that we call the abstinence violation effect. Now, this refers mostly to when people are trying to quit drinking or using other substances, is that when they violate the rule that they made for themselves of abstinence, they they kind of get into this all or nothing kind of thinking mindset of like, oh, I've messed up everything, so now I might as well just drink all day, or I might as well drink all week, or any number of ways that this can play out. But the idea is that once you've blown it, it's blown completely. That's a really risky way of thinking about things, but it's a very common kind of fallacy, I think, in the psychology around behavior change that we fall into very easily. In a way, it's sort of like giving up and a sort of sense of hopelessness over being able to control a certain behavior, when the reality is that just because you have a moment where you were impulsive, or you ate something you didn't plan to, or you drank and you weren't planning to drink, that doesn't mean that all hope is lost and that you failed at your attempt to change your behavior. So I hope that you learned something valuable today, and I look forward to seeing you next time.